Welcome to the Kind Leader Podcast, where empathy meets action in the world of leadership. Your host, Gino DeGregori, engages with innovators and seasoned professionals from diverse sectors, all demonstrating the power of leading with kindness. And now, your host, Gino DeGregori.
Welcome to the Kind Leader Podcast. I'm your host, Gino DeGregori, and today we have an amazing guest here with us, Dean Heisted. He's been a fellow pilot and friend for almost more than 6 years now. It's been a little bit, right?
Right.
He's the founder of Amelia Air, VP of Technology Operations for Vibrant Health, and also a kind leader. So welcome, Dean. Thank you for making the time here and to talk with us here. So tell us about yourself and background, and most importantly, how are you a kind leader?
Sure. Thank you, Gino. It's great to be here. I appreciate it. And right. So I'm Dean Heisted. I've been around at the technology world for several decades. Run into a lot of people who are not kind, very self-serving, self-centered, and run into some people that are very kind and interesting mentor-type leaders. And yeah, I've been working with technology and people for a long time, and I've discovered, and people have affirmed this in me, that being good with people is very important to be a leader. Because even though my primary business is with computers, and you really don't have to be kind to computers. Right. I mean, you can be downright cruel to computers and they still do exactly what you tell them. Right. Yet people are the crux of the business of humanity. So, and especially in the United States. So I've had to be, and I'm fortunately maybe blessed by an upbringing that gives me some empathy and some compassion and some understanding that being unkind, being brusque, being mean, being foul isn't very productive.
Right. It doesn't go far. You know what I mean? It goes like when you're too harsh or not leading with that empathy or kindness, you know, really people take it back and be like, okay, I'm not going to go that route anymore because of the pain or whatever feeling that goes through, right? But when you go and you are kind, people appreciate that and like that and it's like admire that and like, oh, I want more of that, right? How can I connect, right?
Right.
with those individuals.
Right, exactly. And it's interesting. I have a couple of different perspectives as leading one company and being a W-2 employee at a different company. In the leadership chain, we have at my day job, we have a lot of, it's end of year, right? So it's December 19th and or it's end of December. So we have a lot of vendors coming to us asking for renewals of contracts. And there are some people that are very aggressive, not really caring, not very empathetic, not very compassionate. I tell them some data about the company and they say, well, basically, I don't care. I just want my money. Okay. And probably derived out of the reward system for sales of commissions. Yeah. So that can be really distorting of somebody's humanity and personality. Right.
Yeah, it reminds me of something that I tell people. It's like the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. Right? An individual that has usually a fixed mindset tends to be a little bit more about the transaction, more about, right. I don't care about you per se. I only care about what's in it for me and exactly. what am I going to do. Right. Compared to if you look at somebody with my growth mindset, it's all about, you know, I've talked about this before, a win-win. Right. And looking about, okay, does this individual really need what I'm selling? Or does this individual really appreciate the things that I'm bringing to the table, right? So to make sure that we are kind of creating that win-win all around.
Right. Yeah. As a matter of fact, one of those situations is exemplified by a vendor we had last year. We went, my W-2 company went through a economic downturn last year. And we had some vendors that said, well, gee, you know, you're a good customer and it seems like you have some success in your future. So if you need our services still and we reduce our costs significantly and you stick with us, then when things look up again, we will ride that wave. And there are other vendors that said, you know, if you can't afford us, then go away. I don't want to talk to you. You know, if you can't give me my commission, if you can't give our company the money that it needs, then I'll go find it elsewhere.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's not a very long-term growth mindset at all.
Exactly.
Because as we do trend upwards I'm bringing those vendors with us that worked with us in the hard times.
Right. 100%. And, that's a philosophy that we follow here as well, making sure that it's a win-win. It's the best value for a lot of our customers here. But one of the things, coming back to the growth mindset and this fixed mindset, how are you in your organization? And I know you have two, right? You have the Amelia, and you were talking about there's a difference, right? On the two, but how are you kind of leading with that mindset, with that growth mindset in both, or speak one or the other?
Sure. There are opportunities in both scenarios. So with Amelia Air, we are learning how to grow the organization with volunteers across the country doing some very challenging work. They're almost all volunteers. We don't pay anybody. And it's really dependent on us to lead with compassion, to lead with kindness, because what else are they going to get out of this, right? They're not going to get money. They're not going to get security. They're not going to get benefits. They're not going to get transportation. They don't get anything out of it. So there's no transactional, physical, or financial reward for them. But there's a real emotional reward. I mean, it's a nonprofit. It's a volunteer-led organization. So we do a lot to talk to people who are volunteering. And when they have a hard time at their house or their job or whatever, or when they celebrate things, having a baby or getting a new pilot certificate or getting married, we've had all sorts of interesting, wonderful wins that we really celebrate hard with our people and for our people. Because it matters, right? It really matters.
For sure. And just real quick for the audience that's not familiar with Amelia Air, what is that about?
So Amelia Air is a nonprofit organization that we founded about 5 years ago to work with all sorts of different parties to end homeless shelter pets. So there's a number of ways we do that. One is we have the ability to coordinate and rally volunteer pilots to take pets from kill shelters to rescues that are very good and aggressive about getting these animals rehomed and veterinary care for them. And then there's also work that we do on the education side, on the spay-neuter side, and on, at some point in the future when we have enough money, on legislation. So it's sort of the four avenues that we're using to work the country out of a homeless pet problem.
That's a great vision mission there for that. So
thank you.
We thank you for starting that organization and saving many
thousands of animals
out there.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate enough to do one of those trips with you. I think it was a year ago. So that was very rewarding. So very good. So now with your current day job, as you say, VP of technology, how are you incorporating kind of that growth mindset with your team, and leading with kindness in there?
Yeah, it's a similar thing. If you're compassionate and understand that, hey, we are dealing with people who are really good with computers, but people nonetheless. And look, I've explained this to some of my employees that I believe your job here is to get ready for your next job, to train yourself, to get advanced, knowledge, understandings, the degrees of computational technology work. So most recently, AI is a big boom in the industry, right? So everybody's talking about AI and ML and how can we advance this and how can we take advantage of this for our company and build something cool around it or something profitable or whatever, right? Well, so there's clearly a demand for this. It's probably pretty clearly not as fast to run out as the blockchain cryptocurrency kind of stuff has been. So I can see where AI will be around in 50 years.
Right.
I don't know if everybody's going to be talking about cryptocurrency in 50 years.
Right.
It may be a part of the fabric of our currency exchange in the world, but it may be just a very underlying system for storing and retrieving securely. But for our people, my people especially, I look at ways to advance their understanding, their state of the art, their capabilities. I really push, number one, I push for education on specific certificates. So we use Kubernetes a lot at my job, and I've pushed for everybody on my team, both here, Brazil, and India, to get certified Kubernetes administrators certificates as well as Kubernetes developers certificates, because even though it's not necessary for the job, it's really useful for these people to be better at their job. And frankly, they're motivated because it's good for them for the future. It looks good on their resume, on their LinkedIn profile, whatever. They can talk to people and they can do more, frankly. So I'm a big fan of pushing people that way because it's things that they want to do,
For sure.
I mean, the old Google ethos of 20% of your work day, your work week, your work month was sort of exploratory. What do you want to do? Well, you can't probably go to a auto mechanics shop and learn how to change the distributor or the cylinder heads on a car at the expense of Google. I don't know. I never worked there, but that's not necessarily something that would translate into something terribly useful. However, going off and buying a bunch of Raspberry Pis and setting up a Kubernetes cluster at home just because you want to do that and do some home automation. Great, awesome idea. We'll pay for that as a company. We'll buy you, a couple $100 worth of Raspberry Pis and give you some time to provide and learn these skills.
So truly investing in the people,
absolutely,
in their capabilities, and always pushing them to be better, in what they do,
but pushing them in ways that don't seem like I'm pushing very hard, It's not asking them to do things like, well, look, you've been on call for a week now, but can you just do it for another week because I want you to, or it's really they have to motivate themselves, and I think it's very important for people to motivate themselves. It's very useful when people are.
And that goes back to what I was saying about the growth mindset and the fixed mindset. People that are in the fixed mindset, they're not going to be looking to grow, They're going to be looking like, this is my thing and I'm going to stay in my thing, And you as a leader, kind leader coming in, is like, how can we help you look outside that box or look outside that, that fixed mindset? And there's like so much potential that we see in people many times, And that we can provide that guidance and that shepherding to be like, okay, here's what you can become if you really want to.
And encourage it and create that foundation where it's safe to explore in ways that probably seem a little bit outside the business venture's specific needs. But that is growth, right?
Exactly. The other thing I wanted, as you were talking, you have an international, kind of employee base, You got India, you have Brazil. I think this. I was born in Peru. Came here when I was young, so I embraced the American culture. So I really grew up in this culture. But I'm curious on your experience leading, the way you lead and encourage and work with the employees, and how does the culture impact that leadership? You see what I'm saying?
Sure. Well, there's certainly cultural differences. I think you touched on something where there are cultural differences between different peoples from different countries, and there are ways that I have to be considerate of. For example, it's very rapidly approaching Christmas here, December 25th, and yet there are a lot of people outside the country that don't celebrate Christmas. Heck, there's a lot of people inside the United States that don't celebrate Christmas because it's not part of their religious foundation. So I don't have to be. I choose to be aware of other cultures' interesting holidays and celebrations. And so in India, Holi is a big one that just passed, and Diwali is another big one that we don't celebrate in the United States as a federal holiday. So it's very interesting. It's kind of wonderful to hear about and see these things. There's some very colorful festivals and celebrations there, and in Brazil as well. And so we have every other week, we have a half-hour discussion with the team, both in all three continents, India, United States, and Brazil. And there are some wonderful sort of experiences and sharing of things that translate across cultures when we're having these discussions. Don't tell anybody, but my boss would probably, the CEO of the company would probably get a little bit frustrated hearing this, because that's a half hour of time that I'm taking of 20, 25 people where they're not being, productive, quote unquote. We're paying people for that half hour. That's a fairly expensive meeting. And I'm very acutely aware of that. And I still choose to do it every other week because there's some foundational relation experiences and communication styles and things that you can get out of that sort of meeting and discussion and free-flowing, free-form meeting where people are just talking about what's going on in their culture, in their political environment, in their economic environment, things that don't have anything to do with Kubernetes or AWS EC2 instances or database retrievals and storage and costs and all those things that we have to worry about. That's what we're paid to worry about.
Right. And that's a great idea. I mean, it's really about the connection at the end of the day, right? You talked about humans and computers, right? In computers, you tell it what to do, but with humans, you have to connect. You have to make sure you understand where you're coming from, what's your background, your perspective, and make the connection on who you are as an individual too, right? Like you and I are very connected from a flying pilot and we've aviation, right? Industry, and we can talk about that all day long. We won't here, but that's great. So every other week you connect, you bring your people together, just be able to chat, and that's an amazing investment in being able to build a team, right? Rather than focusing too much on the technology, right? Because if you're in a meeting, everybody's focused on the outcome of generating a solution, or everybody's focused on that. But if you're in an hopefully right. But if you're in an environment where you're setting this up, where people now only focusing on connecting and making those connections and understanding, that elevates. Maybe some people don't see the investment, right?
But not everybody participates equally, right?
Right.
So, and I think of it sort of as, look, I've got a Mac sitting in front of me. There's probably a Windows computer somewhere nearby. They don't talk very well together, but there are certain things that people and technologies have done to create a gateway between two completely separate operating systems, right? When I talk to the people in India, thankfully we talk in English because I don't speak Hindi or any of the other 100+ languages that are spoken in India. So there are gateways. And then, of course, there's gender differences, male and female experiences of talking to people or talking to bosses. There's sort of those kinds of experiences. So some of those I'm trying to create gateways.
Right.
That's the ability to talk.
And same thing I imagine down in Brazil as well, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, there's sure, the Portuguese language is a beautiful language, but I don't understand it and I don't speak it. So fortunately we get to speak English, and there's it's a very, very warm country. There's the 70% of the world's oxygen, I think, comes from the rainforests down in South America. However, the beaches and that culture of beach and vacation is very much like an island time country. Nice. But there's some really good people that do a lot of really good work, and
that's awesome.
They have some different perspective, different economy, and different leadership and political situations.
Yeah, and the world that's technology, even AI, it'll continue to shrink the world in a way where people are. We're talking about connection, we're talking about technology, but we're also talking about understanding on how do we lead all these different dynamics, right? And that's one of the reasons I started this podcast. I really wanted to show people that you can lead organizations, teams, even countries with kindness, with empathy.
That's a wonderful ideal.
It is. Absolutely. And I know a lot of people out there, there's just different views and perspectives and backgrounds, but I truly believe that people can. I am doing it, right? You're doing it.
Right.
And I want to show the world that there are many amazing people that are kind of creating that environment, right, for their folks to grow and be amazing things.
Yeah, exactly. And or to build amazing companies without necessarily having to be the very traditional, almost neurotic, incredibly self-centered, incredibly focused, right? Being focused doesn't mean being a jerk, right?
Correct.
You can be very focused and still be empathetic and kind and compassionate to human beings that you're dealing with. I think that's sort of a standard that's been set or reinforced in maybe American culture. I don't know about worldwide cultures, but there's a lot of really self-serving kind of jerks out there that are successful.
Right.
But I don't think it's because they're jerks.
Right. I think just things happen. But one of the visions that I have from our organization is to attract and create kind leaders that are impacting our customers, partners, and communities. And that's important when you see organizations that aren't just focused on technology solutions. That's part of the mission. That's part of execution and delivering value to your customers, right? But at the end of the day, you started with, we're humans, right? We're leading people. We are, and every individual is different, right? And we're not going to be able to cater to every single individual. But if we have a framework, we have a vision, right? And we have a way for people to be themselves. Right.
Absolutely.
And be able to voice themselves in a good way to participate and drive that culture,
Yeah, exactly. And being themselves can be really challenging if you're looking for a bunch of automata to create an army of people who do the same thing and just do a lot more of it, because that's maybe all I don't know. Or maybe that's all the company can afford to be focused on. I don't know. But if you can embrace the fact that you're going to get different people when you hire people that are capable at doing things well or differently or better or worse than others, well, go find all of their skills and all of their abilities that you can reinforce, and figure out how to use that in the company. I think that's wonderful and valuable ethos.
Yeah. And we're seeing that. I mean, we're growing in this organization, and we are attracting kind leaders. And the biggest thing for me is it's been, as an entrepreneur, you talk about not necessarily control in a negative way, but you have to let go, right? Of certain areas that now you're bringing individuals that are grabbing and leading those groups, those departments, those sections, or even projects, right? And that's the hardest part. I mean, as entrepreneurs, hoping you're listening to this, is it's as you're leading an organization, there's that you're leading with empathy and kindness, but also you have to be able to let go, of things that you're going to have to trust and allow that leader that you brought into that team is going to take it to the next level. That's hard sometimes.
It is, right? I imagine it's very difficult to let go. And at the same time, you look at really remarkable things, the redwood forests in California that are hundreds of years old, and they're enormous, truck-sized trunks. Nobody controlled that, right? Yeah. They were organically created and grown. Now, not all of them thrived, right? Some of them shadowed the others, and they withered and died because they couldn't get any sunlight. They couldn't get growth. But if you can take those as a leader and transplant those to other areas where there's lots of sun that they can grow into something amazing, it's wonderful to then, like you said, let go of the outcome.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You brought up a good point, letting go of the outcome, because as entrepreneurs are driven individuals, individuals, we're tied so much on the outcome, on growth. We need to hit these numbers. We got to get these things, we got to keep the customers happy at this rate or whatever, right? That the outcome is there. You said it once. And then you have to work with your team, work with the humans, work with the people to ensure that we're tracking that. And if we don't hit, we learn from that, right? It's like, instead of saying being angry about it, how can we avoid that in the future? And how can we build a better team or a better strategy or a better plan so we can get there?
And you said something interesting too, is don't get angry about it. That's an interesting challenge, because I think very often as leaders, we tend to think, well, I've got a good vision here. I know what I need to do. I know what the team needs to do. And if sometimes people think either a couple different scenarios. One, they think if they don't hit that mark, that's a failure of me. Right? I didn't give them enough direction. I didn't control them enough. I didn't tell them our vision precisely or in enough frequency for them to say, oh, that is exactly where I need to go. And they didn't get there. So that's a problem with me. That's not true. It may or may not be true, but it's not a problem with the leader inherently, right? Sure, it might be a problem with communication. It might be a problem with frequency or definition or vision or whatever, but that's not a problem about that person. So it's like taking things personally is really a remarkably challenging problem to solve, because being kind means we can't take when people say, and then the other scenario is somebody says, I don't want to do that. Or maybe they don't even say it. They just can't do it because they're not sort of built that way. And we as empathetic, kind leaders haven't figured that out yet, haven't understood that maybe this person is a different gender and they can't do something because historically they weren't allowed to in their home environment.
Right.
Okay, as a leader, I need to understand maybe something about that. I don't really need to delve into everybody's,
right.
family of origin history. But if I understand that, hey, sometimes people will just be completely uncomfortable doing something and they will just put on the brakes and stop. Okay, again, that's not about me. That's not a failure in me. And more particularly, it's not necessarily a failure in them.
Yeah.
To be empathetic about that and say, I need to put my white lab coat on and determine exactly why this is happening, because it has nothing to do with me. I didn't screw up. I didn't hurt somebody. They're not doing this against me.
Right.
They're just doing it because this is how they are built.
And that's the biggest thing I think that you and I have, it's like when we face adversity or we face challenges, we don't start blaming ourselves or blaming a team. It's like, okay, what happened? And how can we work through it?
Right, absolutely.
And how can we get better or learn from this challenge rather than, oh man, F this, F that. Right. So I appreciate that perspective. And I think that's one of the biggest things as it relates to being a kind leader, that you take adversity as an opportunity to grow rather than.
Exactly.
Right.
I call them AFOGs, another effing opportunity for growth.
There you go. I'll have to use that later. That's awesome. One of the things, one of the questions here that I have is, as we've been talking some great things about our experiences and what we are seeing with our team members and stuff like that, and even the world, right? But where do you see kind leaders being in the future, right? As we continue to share to the world that you can lead a multi-billion-dollar organization as a kind leader.
Right.
That's one of the goals, right?
Right.
But what is your vision? What are you seeing out there?
Well, that's a great question. I think we're starting to see that a bit now. You look at Tim Cook is a very clear example of a fantastically compassionate, empathetic, very driven leader of, like you said, a trillion-dollar company, multi-trillion-dollar company.
There you go.
I think we will see that more as leaders like that emerge and become part of the ideological vision, that some kid that's growing up and says, well, who do I want to be like? What do I want to do? Maybe their parents are telling them, oh, you should run big companies and you should do big, great things. Well, then who are they going to look at? They're going to look at, Elon Musk and Tim Cook and Larry Ellison, and depending on their foundation that they've been brought up in, they might decide, I like these guys who don't seem to say really mean things or cruel things to other people. I hope that's the path that we're going down. And it's possible with leaders who are kind, giving that vision and creating a role model. So creating great role models.
Right.
In leadership, in clearly successful, financial or business growth, different companies that they've created or sustained or grew. Those are the sort of models of success. And if you can have a role model that's also very kind and compassionate.
For sure. And I agree with you. And there's a lot of great leaders out there, which I hope to have in this podcast someday, right? Tim Cook is a great one. Satya, the CEO of Microsoft, another amazing, I read his book, and he's all about growth mindset and leading with, he's got an amazing story with his kid and how he's led, Microsoft for the last decade now, and really, really has changed a lot of the culture. Prior to him, it was a different mindset and mentality. Not it was negative, but it was different. It was
right.
And so I'm seeing a lot of that. So and that's my hope, right? That's my hope, that we educate people out there that you can be a kind leader and lead with and build amazing organizations out there. So.
Yeah. I think empowering employees and empowering people that work for you or work around you is really useful.
Right.
Giving them, again, the foundation that we can build on our own. I've got 2 legs, just like most of humanity. That's not a heck of a foundation, Having 10 or 20 people around me with 20 or 40 legs standing on the ground, pushing up against, whatever adversity we have. That's a heck of a foundation, being able to move something and drive something together.
Exactly. And believing in that vision that you have for your organization, right? And that helps a lot because you have the right team.
Yeah.
You're attracting the right team.
Exactly.
You're building the right team. And you can, it almost feels like you can do anything.
Right. Yeah. If they trust you and you trust them, right?
Yeah.
Now, if they're afraid of you and you're, maybe you're afraid of them too, you create people. You think about Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
He's got an interesting style of leadership because there's a lot of people that are afraid of him. Right. And I imagine he's afraid of the the attempted coups, and he has to protect himself against that rather than create some foundational trust.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that I got two more questions, as we are wrapping up here. One is for future or young folks coming out of college, right? Recently graduating here in December or graduating here in May. What advice do you have for them as they're looking to opportunities out there? And especially, I know it's hard to understand an organization right off the bat, right? As they're looking for different organizations that they're trying to apply for. But what advice do you have for them,
Yeah, sure. So first of all, be true to yourself, right? I think if somebody is incredibly shy and they're going after jobs that are going to require them to be very vocal and out there in people's faces, maybe not. That's not a great choice. It doesn't mean it's a bad choice because it may be, I kind of want to push myself, and they may have that sort of mentality, ethos. So you really got to know yourself and be true to yourself to be able to find the things that are going to be incredibly satisfying. So that's all about self. And the only other piece of advice I have is do your due diligence about other businesses and opportunities out there. I never knew about aviation opportunities or jobs. Yeah. I never dreamed that I could have a job doing flying.
Right.
I mean, flying just seemed like this fantasy idea that seemed really cool, but I really didn't educate myself. I was very into computers very early on, and in the late 70s, I'll say. So the more you know about what's out there and have a good feeling of how that is attractive to you or not, how that might make you feel motivated to do some work or not, looking at who you are and where you might fit. Those are the kind of the two things.
That's amazing. And thank you for answering that, because my audience, this is, one of the first episodes, and I was kind of, my idea was to put this podcast out there to educate people about Kind Leader and targeting entrepreneurs, business leaders. But then also, as we were talking, I was like, they are going to be young listeners too.
Absolutely.
Coming out of the market, right? Coming out of the education. And I don't know if there are, I know there are not many podcasts talking about this leadership and kindness, right? So, I appreciate that advice to them, right? And I want to make sure that if they are listening out there, it's a great advice as it relates to be yourself, right? Absolutely. And really follow your passion at the end of the day is what you're saying.
Yeah.
And don't think that you have to be mean or, domineering to do something amazing.
Right. To succeed.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I love this. This is a great idea, great opportunity to push the idea of, hey, it doesn't mean you have to be aggressive or self-serving in order to be successful. Yeah.
Even real quick on as it relates to our flying, adventures, right? You can see when you're talking to ATC, right? The way you communicate, I've noticed other people who are some aggressive pilots out there.
Right.
Sometimes they get put on the box, when they're not acting, not being nice, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's a good example. When I file for a flight and there's a lot of training activities going on at the local airport here, because I've established a relationship with these people and because I will do what they need.
Yes.
Absolutely, I will prioritize everything that they need. Totally get that, because these guys are in control of the airspace around to make us safe, right? And create opportunities for us to fly in a very safe manner. But if I am very compliant and also very kind, I do find, boy, when I call up for my instrument flight plan, they will pretty consistently expedite me from the hangar all the way down to departure.
Nice.
And yeah, that's not surprising to me, but it's something that seems to elude others.
Right. And that's been my experience too. Just be kind, man. Just be kind at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. It will get you far.
Absolutely. Last question for you. If you had an opportunity to sit down with either somebody that's alive or is no longer with us for coffee, right? Who would that be and why?
So there's kind of two answers to that. One, for the intellectual pursuit, I would love to talk to Albert Einstein. He's not only, it's a very personal thing as well, because he certainly had a very interesting, different way of thinking, but he also had some wonderful sort of standards and ethics about him that really stand out. And then from a much more sort of human-centric, emotional-centric perspective, there's two people. One, Brene Brown, who does a lot of wonderful sort of emotional awareness and emotional intelligence gathering exercises and talks, both on TED, as well as, interestingly enough, Alanis Morissette. She does a lot of this as well. She's had a pretty interesting, extremely challenging at times life, meeting success, but being very sensitive person, very aware, very emotionally available, maybe to a fault, she might say. And she's conquered a lot of that. So I think that would be very interesting.
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you for sharing there,
Yeah.
Dean. Well, thank you very much for your time. It's been an amazing session here.
pleasure.
You know, it's like I said, I really appreciate your friendship and getting to know you. Continue to get to know you. You're an amazing guy, and really continue to lead with kindness, and more great things will continue to happen.
Yeah, that's one thing I love about you is the ability to be kind and generous and have a vision and execute on it. It's a real melding of a couple wonderful things in humanity. So I appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you very much. And thank you all the listeners out there. And I will leave you with this. Be kind, bring value, rise together. Thank you all. Bye.